Hey guys, tonight we're heading into the bleak, bone-chilling world of post-Roman Britain, a place where winter doesn't just test your patience, it tests your will to live. This isn't your cosy ski lodge snowstorm or hot cocoa by the fireplace. This is mud, ice, and the kind of cold that gets inside your bones and just stays there. The Roman legions are long gone, roads are falling apart, and trade networks? Forget about them, you're pretty much on your own, with a handful of neighbours and a dangerously understocked barn. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now tell me, what city are you listening from, and what time is it? Midnight in Chicago, 9 PM in Glasgow? I want to know who else is suffering through this with us. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the kind of morning that makes your teeth ache before you even get out of bed. Except you're not in a bed. You're curled up on a pallet of straw under a roughly woven wool blanket that smells like the sheep it came from. Frost clings to the inside of the wooden walls, and your breath hangs in the air like mist. Outside, the wind is howling through the bare trees, rattling loose bits of thatch from your roof. You know it's cold when even the dog hasn't moved. He's curled up tight by the embers of last night's fire, his nose tucked beneath his tail. You envy him. It's somewhere around 500 AD. Maybe 510, but calendars aren't really a thing right now. You measure time in moon cycles and harvests. You're one of the survivors, part of a ragged little settlement that used to be part of a Roman villa town. The stones are still there, sticking up out of the earth like forgotten bones. But the roofs are gone and most of the walls have been repurposed for other things. What remains of civilization lies buried beneath a layer of cold mud and memory. Latin's faded from everyday speech. Roads are overgrown. Coins don't mean much anymore, but a sack of barley, that's currency. You sit up, wrap yourself in an extra cloak, and fumble for your boots, hardened leather things stuffed with bits of fur and straw. You curse softly under your breath. They're damp, they're always damp. Winter here isn't just snow, it's wet, relentless, creeping cold. Your roof leaks. The hearth barely draws smoke anymore. And if you don't tend to the fire soon, you'll lose what little warmth remains. You shuffle toward the hearth. Someone's already been up. Probably old Bryn, the goatkeeper, and tossed on some peat. It smoulders quietly, filling the hut with a thick, earthy scent. There's barely any wood left, not unless you want to go into the forest again, and no one really wants that. Not unless they're desperate. Breakfast is predictable. Gruel, barley mash, thickened with a little goat milk if you're lucky. The bread's tough and flat, harder to chew now that the last of your upper molars gave out last spring. You chew slowly, not because you savour it, but because your body's trying to decide if it's food or insulation material. Outside, the snow has crusted over with a layer of ice. A red squirrel darts across the yard and you watch it with envy. He has food. He has a plan. You go out anyway, you have to. The animals need tending, the roof needs patching, and if you don't break the ice in the trough, the goats won't drink. The wind knifes through your cloak as you step into the frozen slop that used to be your garden. There's no scent in the air anymore, just cold, pure and dry. Even the chickens are quieter than usual. They huddle together in a corner of their pen, feathers fluffed, eyes half shut. Your fingers go numb within minutes. You pull them inside your sleeves and keep moving. That's the key in winter. Keep moving. Stillness is the enemy. Stillness lets the cold in, lets it settle in your joints, behind your ribs, beneath your tongue. You remember what happened to Era last year. She went to check on her father's grave one frosty morning and didn't come back. They found her stiff and curled like a sleeping cat just past the tree line. You head back inside, thankful for the smothered glow of the hearth. Someone's boiling water. That's a luxury. Hot water means you're still winning. Here's a fun little twist of irony. Your ancestors, before the Romans came, actually handled winter a bit better in some ways. They had tighter knit tribal networks, better knowledge of native plants, and fewer expectations of grain storage. But now, after centuries of Roman rule, your people have lost touch with some of that. You've inherited the ruins of Roman infrastructure without the skills to maintain it. Villas with broken hypercourse systems mock you with their silent, empty walls. You could be warm in there if you knew how to fix them, but you don't. No one does. And yet people persist. You help patch a neighbour's roof with sod and woven twigs. You share a smoked fish from a late autumn catch. You swap news. Someone saw a trader's wagon last week on the old Roman road. which means spring might not be so far off. That is, if it doesn't snow again, which it will. Of course it will. You think about leaving sometimes, heading south toward the coast, maybe finding passage to Gaul, but travel in winter is madness. Roads are gone, bridges collapsed, and besides, there's no guarantee things are any better across the sea. Word has it things are worse even. Plagues, raiders, famine. You're better off staying put, hugging the fire and hoping your smoked meat holds out another month. The scholarly debate? Oh, it's a lively one. Some historians argue that post-Roman Britain didn't experience a total societal collapse, that communities adapted, that local elites kept some semblance of order. Others say no, it was a sharp nosedive into chaos and isolation. The truth probably lies somewhere between. What you do know, from your cold toes and empty belly, is that survival isn't philosophical, it's immediate. Day by day, bite by bite. Outside, night creeps in fast. The sky turns a bruised purple and a soft flurry begins. You add another peat brick to the fire and lay down your cloak for another night of half sleep. You're alive, for now. The wind claws at the walls again, like it is looking for a way in. You close your eyes and whisper to no one. Just get me to spring. It's the next morning and your breath still fogs in front of your face before you even get both eyes open. Another night survived, but your body feels like it aged a decade in your sleep, if you can even call that sleep. You're stiff, sore, and already thinking about how to get more fuel for the fire. Winter in this place doesn't loosen its grip easily, but as you sit up and grope around for your boots, still wet, still cold, you can't help but think about how you even got into this mess in the first place. Not you specifically, but your people, the land, Britain. Once upon a time, this little slice of damp earth was part of the Roman Empire, not just a colony, an actual outpost of Rome's vision of civilization. There were heated bathhouses, paved roads, marketplaces, amphitheatres, taxes and governors. Your great-grandparents might have eaten olives, imported from places they couldn't even pronounce. Latin was spoken, or at least mumbled through official scrolls, and winters, while still brutal, came with systems in place to help people get through them. Grain stores, protected trade routes, central governance, and most importantly, structure. And then, just like that, the Romans left. Around 410 AD, they packed up their soldiers, their bureaucrats, their bathwater and said good luck. Barbarian invasions on the continent had them scrambling, and Britain, remote and expansive to maintain, was cut loose. The governors were gone, the garrisons emptied, and those fancy stone villas and Hippocaust-heated homes left to rot. Your ancestors, once promised a seat at the imperial table, now sat alone in the ruins of a system they didn't build and couldn't maintain. Imagine inheriting a palace you don't know how to repair, with no instructions, no tools, and no way to call tech support. You head outside again, stomping through half-frozen mud and glance over at the pile of crumbled stone near the river, a former Roman bathhouse, now home to rats, moss, and one particularly territorial goose. You don't go near it much. It reminds you of how far things have fallen. The bricks are still there, strong and clean under centuries of grime, but no one knows how to put them back together. The nearest thing to government now is the village elder, old Cadeon, who smells like fermented turnips and insists the old gods still speak to him in dreams. The irony is thick enough to cut with a bone knife. The very Roman structures that once made winters bearable, grain granaries, heated floors, sealed roofs, have outlasted the knowledge needed to use them. You've got the shell, but no yolk. Some people have tried adapting the ruins. One village north of you lives inside a crumbling Roman fort, plugging gaps with timber and door, building fires over shattered tiles. You visited once. It felt haunted. Food's tight again today. You find yourself gnawing on yesterday's barley cake, the corners gone hard as stone. You'd trade your soul for a Roman amphora of olive oil right now, or even just a sack of their hardy wheat. Funny how even in ruin, the Romans still show up in your thoughts, like ghosts of a more comfortable past. And here's the thing most people forget. The collapse wasn't a single explosion. It was slow, uneven, and patchy. Some areas held on longer than others. A few coastal towns maintained bits of trade, even echoing Roman customs and laws well into the 500s. Historians are still debating just how dark the Dark Ages actually were. Was it a complete cultural nosedive or just a shift, one system dissolving while another slowly took shape? The academic feud rages on, but you're not particularly interested in nuance when your roof leaks and your stomach growls. From where you're standing, ankle deep in icy muck, it sure feels dark. You think about your grandmother. She used to tell stories of how life used to be. Tales passed down about warm floors and hot baths. She described rooms where steam filled the air and people soaked together without freezing their bones. You thought she was making it up. Now you wonder if maybe she wasn't. Still, life moves on now. People adapt. You've patched your own shelter more times than you can count, layer after layer of thatched daub and hope. You learned how to shape clay into crude cups, how to twist nettles into twine, how to trap rabbits using only bent sticks and a bit of stolen cheese. You've become something between a farmer, a builder, and a survivalist, because that's what post-Roman Britain demands: versatility. You visit the neighbour's house, if it can be called that. It's a little more than a lean-to built against a low Roman wall. They've covered the gaps with wattle and daub, but you can still see the original stone archway poking out behind a curtain of straw. Inside, it's dark and smoky, and the air smells like damp dog and boiled roots. They're better off than some, though. They've got a cow, a real live, slightly mad cow. That's wealth. You help haul some logs for them, twisted, soggy things that barely burn, and they offer you a scrap of dried apple in thanks. You nibble it like it's a feast. The sweetness almost makes your eyes water. The kid in the corner, about 6 years old and wearing 3 layers of rags, watches you like you might be a Roman spirit. You wink at him. He doesn't smile. Later you sit by your own fire, poking at it with a stick, trying to will it to grow. The wood is damp again, spitting angrily. You sigh and settle in, listening to the wind outside. It whistles through the trees, through the gaps in the walls, through your teeth. You wrap yourself tighter in your cloak and stare into the flame, which isn't so much heating you as it is distracting you from how cold you are. The fire crackles, and you wonder if the Romans ever imagined this. Did they know that one day their roads would crumble, their villas would flood, and their bathhouses would house goats? Did they ever look around and think, this is too good to last? You don't know. You just know you're here now in the cold trying to make it another night. And the question you can't stop asking, what comes next? Is this how it is now forever? The winter's always going to be this hard? Or will someone someday find a way to build something new? But not tonight. Tonight, you curl closer to the dying fire, pull your blanket to your chin, and try not to think too hard about tomorrow. The morning begins not with birdsong, but with the creaking groan of timber and the unsettling drip of melted frost finding its way through your roof. One drop lands squarely on your forehead. You grumble and roll over, pulling your blanket tighter, but the cold has already slithered in. Outside, a thick fog curls through the skeletal trees, clinging to the earth like it too is tired and heavy. Everything feels wet, the kind of damp that doesn't dry, just shifts around your clothes like a second skin. And your home, well, calling it a home might be generous. It's a timber-framed, mud-walled hut that leans slightly to one side like it's giving up too. You built it with your own hands, though, and in a weird way. That makes it feel like a part of you, drafts, leaks, and all. You push open the heavy wooden door and step outside into the biting air. Every breath tastes like iron and ash. The frost hasn't just touched the ground, it's swallowed it. The grass is gone, buried under a thin shell of white that crackles beneath your boots. You trudge around the back of the hut and eye the walls, daubs cracking again. You trace your fingers along the gaps, already thinking about mixing another batch, straw, clay and animal dung, your holy trinity of winter survival. The way you smear it between the wooden lattice walls is half necessity, half meditative art. A good mix keeps the wind out and the warmth in. A bad mix is why your left wall weeps when it rains. You glance at the neighbouring homes, each one a variation on the same theme. Timber frames, wattle walls, thatched roofs. A few more ambitious neighbours have added bits of stone to their lower walls, stolen from the Roman ruins nearby. The logic is simple. If it's survived this long, it's probably stronger than anything you can slap together with mud and prayer. Inside these huts, it's smoky, cramped, and always too dark, but it's something. And in this era, something is a blessing. There's a smell that hangs in the air, smoke, peat, and a faint whiff of manure. It's not unpleasant anymore. It's the smell of life continuing. You gather some dried bracken to toss into the hearth later, enough to spark a decent flame. Real firewood is a luxury these days. Trees near the village were cut down long ago, and no one wants to go deeper into the forest unless they have to. But you'll get to that eventually. For now, it's patchwork season, and this place needs serious patching. You head to the side wall and crouch, rubbing the damp spot where yesterday's snowmelt crept in. Cold seeps up through the soles of your boots, and you shift to avoid a puddle. The wind's picked up again, sliding across the landscape like a predator. Every gust finds new ways to poke into your home, reminding you that wattle and daub is a decent idea, but far from perfect. The cold always finds a crack. Always. You run your hands along the timber, noting where it's warped. When the Romans built structures, they carved everything to precise angles. They had nails, real ones. You use wooden pegs, twisted twine, or, if you're desperate, chewed rawhide straps. The walls aren't square and the roof leans like an old man with a bad hip, but it stands. That's all that matters. It stands, for now. The history books will one day debate how much technical knowledge was lost when Rome fell. Some say much of it survived, tucked into monasteries or preserved in oral tradition. Others argue that generations passed without any clear idea of how their ancestors built with such precision. You're inclined to believe the latter, not because you've read a scroll, but because you've tried building something and you know how hard it is. There's no blueprint, no measuring stick, just instinct, trial and error, and a hope that the roof doesn't cave in on your head during the next snowstorm. By midday, your fingers are coated in clay. You've patched 2 sections of wall, reinforced the corner where the wind sneaks through, and tied a leather strap across a sagging beam. It's not elegant, but elegance isn't your concern, endurance is. Every improvement means one less chance of waking up to find your floor frozen solid or your roof split from the weight of snow. Inside, the hearth smoulders quietly. You squat in front of it, feeding it bits of dried moss and bracken to coax it back to life. The smoke curls up and out the vent hole, not that it matters much. The whole hut leaks smoke in every direction. Your eyes sting constantly now, and the soot settles into your clothes like it belongs there. But the heat is what matters. Without it, everything stops. You stop. A lot of folks don't even bother building separate rooms anymore. The family, the animals, and all their worldly belongings exist in one smoky, low-ceilinged space. You've seen homes where goats are tied inside at night, not just for safety, but for warmth. Their breath and body heat raise the temperature just enough to keep the frost from forming on the walls, a living furnace. You've thought about bringing in your own scrawny goat, but he's got a temper and tends to relieve himself wherever he pleases. Still, if the cold gets worse, you might have to reconsider. And here's a fringe fact for you. Some of the best early insulation wasn't invented, it was grown. Moss, turf, and even sheep's wool were stuffed into cracks to keep out the wind. People got creative. You once saw a hut with a wall lined in fish scales. It smelled horrible, but the wind didn't get through. Whatever worked, people used. That's the essence of life now. Not about what's proper, but what gets you to spring. You sit down hard on your straw mat, exhausted but satisfied. The wool won't hold forever, but it'll last the next storm. Probably. Maybe. The fire crackles to life again, and you finally relax for a second. Letting the warmth wash over your numb fingertips. It's not a palace. It's not Rome. But it's a victory. A very small, very smoky victory. Outside, the wind howls again, long and low, like it's trying to remind you who's really in charge. You pull your cloak tighter and mumble something under your breath. Half curse, half prayer. The cold doesn't care what language you say it in. You know the real work doesn't start in winter. It starts before winter, way before. If you're not hustling in late summer and sweating through early autumn, then by January you're eating moss and regretting every lazy afternoon you ever took. The people who survive around here aren't just tough, they're obsessive about preparation. Winter is a slow-moving predator, and you have to feed yourself before it gets hungry. Today you've been tasked with the grim ritual of checking your food stores. The makeshift cellar is just a hole dug into the frost-hardened ground and lined with woven baskets, pottery jars and lumpy sacks. It's damp down there, damp enough that anything not properly wrapped tends to rot or mould. You lift the hide covering the entrance and ease yourself down the ladder, which is really just a notched log propped against the earthen wall. It creaks under your weight, and one of the rungs wobbles a little more than you'd like. Your breath hangs in front of you like a ghost as you reach the bottom. It's darker than you remember. You feel around blindly until your fingers find the basket of turnips. Still firm, that's good. You move on to the smoked meat, just a few small chunks wrapped in cloth and dangling from a beam overhead. Rats have chewed one of the cords. A piece is gone. You curse quietly and swat at the shadows, knowing full well it's too late. There's a crock of grain tucked in a corner. Barley, a little oat. You pinch a bit between your fingers, still dry, no mould, you sigh in relief. There's not much of it, but it'll stretch. You've become a master at turning barely edible into almost comforting. It's not about flavour, it's about calories. Fat and starch are your best friends now. You'd marry a pile of lard if it meant you'd get to February with your ribs still covered. You haul up a few items and stagger back into the light, squinting as you emerge from the cellar. The day's already fading because of course it is. The sun barely sticks around this time of year, like it's too tired to deal with you. A soft snow is falling, fine as flour, dusting everything in a deceptive beauty. You shake it off and head inside with your haul. Tonight's meal? A stew. Not because it's fancy, but because it's the only way to make 3 shriveled turnips, half an onion and a chunk of dried goat meat feel like something resembling dinner. You throw it all into a clay pot, add water and set it by the fire. It'll simmer for hours, mostly because you're trying to convince yourself it's doing something magical. As it bubbles, you think about last autumn, the sheer madness of harvest season. Every able-bodied soul out there from dawn to dusk pulling up root vegetables, drying herbs, salting meat, gathering every last nut, berry or edible weed. You remember that frantic energy, that unspoken fear driving everyone, because once the first frost hit, time stopped being measured in days and started being measured in how many sacks of food you had left. Some villages set quotas, share the food, keep everyone alive. Others, every family for themselves. You've heard stories of people stealing from neighbours' cellars, of barns mysteriously catching fire after someone was refused a loaf. It's a dangerous line, community versus survival. You try not to think about it, but you keep a rock under your pillow just in case, and you sleep lightly. There's an old saying around here, harvest feeds the winter, but hunger sharpens the knife. You never quite understood it until last year, when 2 brothers got into a fistfight over a basket of apples. The apples were bruised. One of them lost 3 teeth. You've since learned not to underestimate what desperation does to people. And here's something curious. A fringe little food trick some folks swear by, fermented nettle mash. You're not sure who figured it out first, but apparently if you boil and ferment nettles with a bit of barley, it turns into a thick, sludgy paste that can last all winter. Tastes like the back end of a wet boot, but it keeps your strength up. You've had worse. You ladle yourself a cup of the stew, watery but warm, and sip it slowly, letting the steam hit your face. Your lips are chapped, and the heat stings a bit, but for a few minutes your belly feels full. Not stuffed, not satisfied, just less empty. You hold the bowl close, soaking in the radiating warmth like it's a miracle. Later that evening the village elder, Cadern, stops by. He doesn't knock, no one really does anymore. He just pushes open your door with his crooked stick and stands there like some kind of winter prophet, snow piled on his cloak and eyebrows. He smells like pine resin and old mead. Got a root rot spreading near the western plots, he grumbles, not even greeting you. Might be the frost going deeper than we thought. You nod and offer him the last of the stew. He takes it wordlessly, drinks from the bowl like it's water, then hands it back. He looks at your fire, gives it a nod of approval. Still burning, that's something. It's the highest compliment you'll get. There's a debate, quiet among the older folks, about whether this climate's always been like this or if the winters are changing. You've heard whispers of a colder shift, of harsher seasons than even the Roman records mention. Some think it's punishment from the gods, others believe it's just the way of the world resetting itself. No one really knows, but you can feel it. Every year, the frost comes a little earlier, the thaw a little later. Every year, your cellar looks smaller. As Cadern leaves, he mutters, "Stock what you can, don't count on March and Mabdi." You nod, even though it's not really advice, it's a warning. You curl up by the hearth that night, full enough to sleep. You think about your neighbour, the one with the rats in her cellar, and you wonder if she's eating tonight. You wonder if you'll trade something tomorrow, maybe an hour of work for a few smoked fish, or maybe just stories, if she's feeling generous. For now, you drift into the kind of sleep that only exhaustion brings, the fire casting a dull orange glow on the walls, and the scent of broth still clinging to your fingers. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Inside, the stew pot's empty. You wake in darkness again, though this time it's not the cold that pulls you from sleep, it's the sound. A sharp clatter in the distance, followed by low voices. You sit up slowly, your blanket sliding off in a heap of scratchy wool and faint goat smell. The fire's burned low, nothing left but red coals and a few sparks. You listen hard. There it is again, someone's shouting. Not panicked, but agitated. You pull on your cloak and step out into the bitter air, feet crunching across the frost-hardened mud. At the edge of the village, a group is huddled around something. You can't see what until you get closer, pushing through the crowd with a few muttered excuses. At the centre of it all is a wooden crate, busted open, half empty, and a young man standing over it, face pale and trembling. His hands are stained dark from the contents of the box, slabs of meat, glistening red and starting to freeze. It's a trade delivery, or at least it was. Someone's raided it. The village was expecting a few barrels of dried goods and a bit of salted meat from the next hamlet over, a rare midwinter lifeline. And now, half's missing, and what's left is barely enough to feed 2 families for a week. You exchange glances with one of your neighbours, Elgan, the stone-faced man who hasn't smiled since the harvest failed 3 years ago. His jaw tightens. Everyone's thinking the same thing. This is bad. Food going missing is more than just inconvenient. It's a threat. Without that trade, the numbers get tighter. The math gets deadlier. There's a quiet kind of fury in the air now, hanging heavier than the snow. A few villagers start pointing fingers. No one has proof, of course, but suspicions are already taking root. You don't blame them. Hunger rewrites people. You've seen it in small ways, cheating on rations, hoarding scraps, pretending you didn't hear your neighbour's kid cry last night from an empty stomach. But this is big. This was the backup plan. And now it's gone. You drift back to your hut, uneasy, and sit down by the fire. You stoke it with the last of the dried moss you gathered yesterday, then tuck your hands under your cloak and close your eyes. You're not just worried about hunger, you're worried about what people might do before they're starving, and that brings you to salt. It's almost absurd how valuable it is now, this dusty, crystalline miracle that you never used to think twice about. Salt is survival. Salt keeps your meat from rotting. Salt keeps fish edible through February. Salt means you can eat something today and tomorrow. You've become hyper-aware of every grain. When you're lucky enough to trade for a pouch of it, you treat it like treasure. One of the village kids once called it white gold and no one laughed. This winter, the salt trade has dried up again. The coastal routes froze early and the roads are impassable with snow and ice. Traders from the east haven't come in over a month. Some say they have been blocked by Saxon raids. Others say the storms sank their ships. Either way, the result's the same: no salt. You're rationing what's left in your own stash, maybe a few tablespoons at most. It's coarse and dirty looking, with little flecks of grit from the way it was processed. Doesn't matter. It works. You use it sparingly, pressing it into strips of meat with your fingertips like you're casting a spell. It has to last. You remember last year when one family tried using ash instead? Thought it might dry the meat. It didn't. The meat spoiled and 3 of them got sick. The healer couldn't do much, just chewed bark and prayed. You still remember the smell of that hut. There's a small, quiet debate that sometimes comes up around the fire, whether it's worth risking a trip to the coast for more salt. It's a 3-day journey in good weather. In winter, it's more like a week of wading through snowdrifts, sleeping under wet furs and hoping the wolves are hunting something else. A few young men volunteered last year. Only one came back. He was frostbitten and empty-handed. He doesn't speak much anymore. Still, you wonder, is it worth trying again? You look at your dwindling supplies, 2 smoked fish, a few withered roots and 1 half-empty pouch of salt, and you don't say it out loud, but in your gut you know it. This won't be enough. You remember your grandfather's story how when he was young they used to boil seawater in clay pans over hot rocks. It was slow, wasteful, and you had to carry barrels of seawater uphill, but it worked, sort of. Maybe if you could get to the shore just once and bring back a few buckets. But again, roads. The snow. The endless, choking cold. And what if you go and someone else raids your hut while you're gone? You stare into the fire for a long time, chewing the inside of your cheek and weighing the options. The only certainty is that salt, this thing you barely noticed most of your life, is now the difference between eating meat in March and digging a shallow grave in February. Funny thing, there's an old folk belief that salt keeps evil spirits away. Sprinkle it across your doorstep and you're protected. Makes sense, in a weird way. The evil isn't always supernatural. Sometimes it's just the creeping stink of spoiled food, or the bone-thin man who's eyeing your cellar sits a little too closely. You lie back and stare at the soot-darkened ceiling. Somewhere outside, a